Hey friends, it's Sunday again, and on today's menu, some thin herb and butter basted steaks with fried squash, which is my all-time favorite side dish, and a wonderful roasted tomato cheese dish served on toast. You are gonna love it. Stay tuned. Now, when you're cooking a full meal, you want to remember a couple of things. First, timing is everything, especially when it comes to a quick after-church Sunday lunch like this. So whatever's going to take the longest to cook, prepare that first. Get it in the pan or in the oven while you start on the other aspects of the lunch. So today, the thing that's going to take longest is this tomato dish because it's got to bake. The first thing that you're going to want to do is go ahead and heat your oven. In this case, we're going to heat it to 400. Let that begin to get hot as we prepare the dish. So I have sprayed this little pie pan. You can use any kind of small baking dish for this. But we are going to add first 8 ounces of goat cheese. Now some people just don't think they're going to like goat cheese. It does have kind of a strong flavor to it. But I'm telling you, when it's mixed with these tomatoes and herbs, it is delicious. The first thing you're going to do is just kind of tear apart in your pan. This is all going to melt down pretty well. So just break it up and kind of mash it down just a touch. Spread it around. There's no pretty way to do this. At least not that I've found. Just make sure the pan's pretty well covered with it. Like this. Now, this is your serving dish, so just set it to the side, but the reason we sprayed it is just for easy cleanup later. We're going to take another small baking sheet and we're going to put in 2 cartons, which I think were about 12 ounces each, of these pretty grape-sized colored sweet tomatoes. I love these. And we're going to add to this some herbs. Now, I said there were a couple of things to keep in mind when making a full meal. The second thing is when you pay up for things like fresh herbs or things like creams or certain sauces or spices, make sure they do at least double duty for you. Now, in this case today, we're going to throw some of this pretty rosemary I bought into both these tomatoes to roast as well as in our steaks later. So just throw in, you know, I've got about 5 sprigs in here. Then add some olive oil over the top. It doesn't take much. Season it with some salt and pepper. And we are literally going to put this in the oven. It just beeps, letting me know it's ready. And we're going to cook it until these tomatoes really break down. And what's going to happen is that once the tomatoes are cooked, we're going to remove the rosemary and we are going to pour these cooked tomatoes, which are going to be a little bit juicy, over this goat cheese, and it's going to melt into just perfection. Now, once I put my tomatoes in the oven, I heated up some oil on the stove. Actually, it's heating now, so I'm going to go ahead and prepare our squash to fry. Now, my mom always taught me that we're going to cut the ends off the squash and cut them up just as thin as you can get them. My mama would have said, cut them so thin they only have one side. But she liked to joke. So I'm going to do just like my mama taught me. Get these squash just as thin as I can. That way you're going to have a little bit of a crunch. I love it a little crunchy. Now once you have all your squash cut up good, just lay it out on paper towels like I have here, double it up, because what we're going to do is try to get a lot of this moisture out. That's another thing Mama taught me. So what we're going to do once they're laid out is just sprinkle some salt over them, and that'll help that moisture to come out. We're going to let these sit here just like this for 5 or 10 minutes, and then we're going to blot them real good and we'll start frying. Now we're just getting our flour ready to put our squash in before we fry it. So it doesn't matter what type of flour you use. I think I have self-rising flour in here. But I like to put it into a Tupperware bowl. That way, once we put our seasonings in, we can just shake it up instead of having to worry about stirring. We can throw the squash in, shake it up, and take it right out of there and put it into the grease. So I put just a couple of cups of flour, and I'm gonna add salt to that. Quite a bit, actually. Some pepper, garlic powder, and paprika. Now you've probably figured out by now that I use these same seasonings over and over, but they really combine to, you know, dress up about anything. So once you've got all that together, let's give it a good shake. And my daddy taught me to make sure you smell it. If you can smell those seasonings in it, you know the taste is going to be there. This isn't very strong, so I'm just going to add a little bit more garlic powder and a little bit more paprika. I don't want to overdo it on the salt. I've already added quite a bit of that, and maybe a little more pepper. We'll give this another shake, and I'm sure it'll be ready to go. Just getting these squash dry. Got a lot of moisture out of it. We could probably squeeze the water out of this paper towel. Now that they're dry, let's start throwing them in our flour. We'll probably do 10 or 12 at a time in our pan with the grease. Give them a good shake. And now let's go to the fryer. Before we start frying, remember I showed you in another video how to test your oil. Take a wooden spoon, stick it down in, and if it really starts bubbling up well, your oil is ready to go. Just make sure it's not too hot. Now, let's start putting in our squash. Just kind of beat a little bit of the flour off. And these are going to fry really quickly. So as soon as I get all these in, we'll probably give them a flip and pull them on out. Once you pull a batch out, just salt it a little bit and just start again. We'll probably have 3 or 4 batches out of this. Well, I just took the tomatoes out of the oven. They've been cooking for about 45 minutes and they're looking really good. But the next thing I want to do, since we're trying to make this a quicker lunch, I don't want to go any more than an hour. I'm just going to press these down just a little, just to pop them some with a potato masher. Well, pressing those should help cut down on the cooking time. We're going to put them back in the oven for about 10 minutes and we're going to get started on the bread, because once we start the steaks, that's going to go really quickly. So I've cut some Italian bread out of the bakery, and I'm just going to brush it with a little bit of olive oil that I've put into a bowl here. Just get them all coated just on one side. And we're going to put these in the oven in the last 5 minutes of baking on the tomatoes. Now while we're finishing up our tomatoes in the oven, I'm just patting these steaks off. Again, they're just a thin little chuck steak, but they're so pretty. We're going to season them up with some salt and pepper, some garlic powder, and some Montreal steak seasoning. You want to apply your seasonings very liberally. Trust me on this one. And once I season one side, I like to press down into the meat with it, and then we're going to flip these over and season the other side. Once our pan is heated up nicely, you're going to want it hot enough for a good sear on the steaks. We're going to add some vegetable oil or canola oil, any type of oil that's got a high smoke point. because you don't want something that's gonna burn. If you put butter in it right now, it's gonna get bitter. If you put olive oil in it, probably the same thing. I'm just gonna move that around a little bit to coat the pan. And then we're gonna add our steaks. I think I can fit all these in. I'll start on the edges here. Nice sizzle. It's gonna make for a wonderful sear. So because these are thin steaks, we're gonna wanna flip these as soon as we've got a pretty good sear on them. And we'll let them cook on the other side for another couple of minutes. Once these have had a chance to sear on the other side, this is the fun part. We're going to add about 1/4 stick of butter to the pan. Just kind of move it all around. Actually, let's add a little bit more. Because the key here is to have enough in your spoon to kind of baste the meat. To that, we're going to add a few more sprigs of rosemary, like we used in the tomatoes. And then I don't have any fresh garlic, so we're just going to add some minced garlic to the pan. Get a look at that. For the last minute of cooking, what we're going to want to do is start sort of basting these pieces of meat with this sauce. And you're going to want to do it continuously for this whole last part of cooking to make sure they're well seasoned with this wonderful herb and garlic butter. Aren't they beautiful? Now the last step is just to pour some of this mixture over the top. We're going to let these rest about 10 minutes until we get finished with the tomatoes. I want you to look how that cheese is already melted down so well. And this is going to make a wonderful spread to go on this Italian bread. Just spoon a little on or a lot. And this is the perfect accompaniment to the steak and fried squash. Happy cooking and happy Sunday from Lamb in the Kitchen.